Hello, everybody. It is time for the very first Leadership Forum live stream. I checked the name of it because I could not remember what it was called. I'm going to be adding Jesse here to pop in. Give me a little hello if you're here and how you guys are feeling today. We are also, let me know if you can hear like a jet engine in the background. I've got a little space heater. I've got a little space heater that's going, so it is potentially very loud. But as in keeping, hey Jesse.
Hi.
Hey. So as in keeping with our plan and the video that we last sent you guys on Thursday, not quite a week ago, we are shifting how things are working in this group. This has been a week of transition, so we've had a few of you reach out to us and observe that it feels very transition-y. So thanks for bearing with us as we kind of figure all this out. We are on this insane journey with you guys, so thanks for sticking it through. But yes, excited to be here today to kick off our very first Leadership Forum. And just to remind you, if you hadn't seen our announcement, we're going to be doing a weekly one of these this same time, the same day, every week, except for one of the weeks a month, it's going to be a roundtable, and you guys are invited to join the conversation as well. So check our events calendar in the Thought Leaders Think Tank, and you'll be able to see all those events. You'll get the Zoom link. Yeah, I think that's what is up in terms of housekeeping. How are you, Jesse?
Doing well. I'm excited to be here and start this conversation. I think there's been a lot of written conversation around this topic of thought leadership ever since we sort of introduced it last week. And I'm excited to actually verbalize some of the thoughts because it's definitely been percolating for a while.
Yes.
And I'm sort of transitioning as well, like what my thoughts are around what a thought leader is. Thoughts around thought leadership. It's very meta.
Yes. Good. So one of the things that's really interesting, I think, is hearing some pushback, but also some clamoring to agree. So I guess probably what is most important for this first week is just digging into what thought leadership is and isn't. And bear in mind, guys, this is like 100% subjective. This is us and our definition, and your definition may be totally different. And that's what we want to invite you guys. Hey, Leanna. So we want to invite you guys into the conversation with us around. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, feel free to comment with your thoughts about what a thought leader is and is not. And we're just going to share kind of our opinion, our journey on coming up with our personal definitions and the process that we're still going through with this as sort of a jumping point for the entire discussion of thought leadership, because each week this month we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, but we have to start with a basic definition and just idea around thought leadership. So we're going to dive right in with what thought leadership is and is not.
Yes. So I loved your Facebook post today, Jesse, about how a lot of times when for those of us who are familiar with the term, we think of Oprah Winfrey, or we think of these sort of huge names who have enormous lists and followings, amazing amounts of influence, lots of money in the bank. At least we hope they do, because they're awesome people. Yay, I'm glad that you've been thinking about this, Leanna. Yeah. And sort of digging into like, well, what's the path from where the average person is who aspires to have influence, who aspires to get their big idea out there. Maybe they don't necessarily want to be Oprah, but they feel like it's important to get their idea out there because they know that it can change the conversation, it can change lives, it can change their industry, it can change something. So how does like an average person like you or me get there, Jesse? And I thought your take on this was really interesting in your Facebook post.
Yeah, and I have to give a shout out to one of our group members, April, because our conversation sort of spurred that post into existence after I had thought about it for a few days. And so her comment had been something along the lines of not having thought of herself as a thought leader before. And one of the responses that kind of came naturally to me, but I hadn't really given thought to right away, was that we can be a leader and a thought leader in so many different capacities, right? We don't need to be Oprah. We don't need to be, Tim Ferriss or Gary Vee standing in front of hundreds of thousands of people having this huge following. Obviously, that's helpful if we have a message that we want to reach a lot of people, but it's also very possible to be a thought leader for your family or your community or your clients. And it's also, speaking as an introvert who doesn't really like the spotlight shining on me all the time, it's also possible to be a thought leader in a very quiet way and in a very intentional way. And I like what you said, Leanna, about intuitively, that your thought is it's someone who gets you to question your own beliefs. So it's really less about being at the front of this army and charging forward with your ideas, and it's more about listening, questioning, prompting, guiding the conversation, and allowing that to be sort of a platform for thought leadership.
Totally. One of the comments too that I thought was so cool around that whole conversation that you were having on your page was digging in even more to that sort of quiet leadership role, about like the power of a writer, right? Like how many times have any of us read a book that we were like, wow, I never thought about that way. Exactly what you're saying, Leanna. And I don't think this is restricted to books, right? Like we've all seen a movie that made us think that, or we've all read even just an article, or we've listened to a live stream or something. We've gone to a church service and heard an interesting sermon, whatever it is. There's so many ways to be sort of a quiet thought changer, which I would argue means you're a thought leader. So it doesn't mean, obviously, like we can't control how someone else responds to what we put out there in the world, although we can be sensitive to other people's reactions and responses. And I think that listening piece is huge, and that sensitivity piece is huge, because if you want to connect with someone, you need to be able to speak their language. But yeah, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have your own like TV network to do that.
Yes. Yeah, and I want to read part of one of the other comments on an article I posted in the group earlier this week, which was Rebecca Hart left this comment, and she's a life coach, and she said that she avoids giving advice, but instead helps others process, unlock, uncover, tell themselves the truth, evaluate and plan with better questions, observations, guided exercises, and a little teaching in a safe container. And so her definition of thought leadership ends up being a leader that provokes thought and engagement. And I absolutely love that definition and that way of perceiving thought leadership as not just pushing my opinions on someone, but creating a container for conversations.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's like good practice as a coach, right? What she does. And so since there are so many coaches and service providers here in this community, chances are like you already are doing a lot of this. And then it's about the energy that you bring to the table, the outcomes you're looking for, the intention you bring to the table. That's kind of where the shift might be happening, and where we're asking ourselves to step up, where we're inviting you guys as well. Those of you guys who know me know I have philosophies around sales, and one of my favorite ways to think about sales is opening a door of opportunity rather than ripping someone's credit card out of their hand and shoving them through the door. But I think it's the same here, right? Yeah, like that's stealing, and B, super rude, and probably not going to get you a devoted following. But I think it's the same here, right? Like we can open the door by creating that space, creating that container. I love how Rebecca says that. It's so true. And I do want to give a nod here to what Leanna is saying. It's about what you don't say or what you don't energetically buy into as well. And I think that's so important, because that's part of what today's topic is, right? Is like, what is thought leadership and what is it not? And part of what it's not is what you don't believe or what you don't buy into. So yes, totally agree on that front.
Yeah, and so kind of diving into that piece of it, what is thought leadership not? I feel like there's a lot of things that thought leadership is not.
You guys, people hate this phrase.
Yeah. Well, and that's another thing, right, that came up recently, is this idea that, is it too trendy of a term? Are people talking about thought leadership all of a sudden because it's just the trend to talk about thought leadership and it's the buzzword? And yeah, that might be partially true. Like people hear words and then pick up on them and repeat them and give their own spin to them, and then it becomes sort of a fad. But what I hope that we're bringing to the conversation is this idea that, okay, if it's popular, why? Why are people talking about this, and how can we have intentional conversations around it that make sense and that really put some meat to the word rather than it just being a buzzword that gets tossed around?
Yeah, like what's the heart of the matter?
Exactly, yeah, and I love what Leanna said down here. She said it's also about what you don't say or energetically buy into. So that leads perfectly into what thought leadership isn't. Because if you're saying things that don't really resonate with you or your intuition or what you hold to be true within your platform, then are you a thought leader, or are you just doing that thing that Rebecca mentioned of pushing your opinions onto others that might not even be opinions you fully buy into?
Totally, totally. So here's sort of the gist, and I'm going to be paraphrasing here because we have written down somewhere a definition of how we look at thought leadership. And I think that'll help us define what it isn't. So for us, it's when you take innovation. So you have an interesting idea. Hey, Polly, speaking of innovator, when you take your interesting, innovative idea, and this doesn't mean you're the first person to come up with it. It may just mean that you have a new perspective, or it may mean you have a new way of communicating it, or you may have a new framework to approach it. Whatever it is, it's something that is from you. It feels real and authentic, and it is going to change the way people look at this question or this issue. So you take your innovation, you take the influence that you have. So maybe that is your list of 500 people or 5,000 people or 50,000 people. Or maybe that is just like Jesse was saying earlier, maybe it's your family, maybe it's your friends, the people who you're close to, who respect you and who know that, you know, you think deeply about things and they want to hear what you have to say. So it doesn't have to be a giant email list, right? You take your influence, your innovation. Hey, Corinza.
Hey, Corinza.
Oh, I'm glad it did show up on your feed. I never know how these algorithms work. So
I just shared it to my personal page, so I think it went a little bit further.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, wait, didn't we have a third I word? What was our third I word, Jesse? Innovation.
So
influence.
We said thought leader, innovation, influence, and can't remember our own definition.
I know, I'm like totally blanking,
but see,
guys.
this is why, because it's totally evolving as we go.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead and pull it up right here because I actually wrote it down. So, that's because it's not an I word. You're throwing me off.
Oh.
It's expertise.
Okay, it's a vowel. And your expertise. Thank you. Okay, sorry to hear about the reception, Polly. I hope it isn't us, and I hope it is clear on the replay. So your expertise. And so this is another one of those areas. All of this is so hot button for people, guys. We've gotten so many people being like, this is the dumbest. I'll get into that in a second. So your expertise. So if you were legitimately an expert at something, so Caritza, for instance, hi, I'm glad you're here. You guys, you and Brandon are total experts at RVing. I can attest to this. You guys have been on the road for many a year, and you're teaching people how to go from, gosh, I wish I could travel more, to actually traveling more in an RV, that there's like steps you can take and you can systematize the process and you can make it work. You can totally still, actually get an income on the road, all that good stuff. Like you guys are total experts at that. You have an innovative way of approaching it because you're one of the only courses, and I think you're the most robust course out there on how to do this. And you have influence, right? Like you guys, you have a community of friends who are other influencers, other bloggers who trust you, who, would put your information out there with full confidence, but you also have a pretty sizable Facebook group of your own with like at least 5 figures worth of people in there. So like you have all 3 of these pieces in place. And then here's the other thing you're doing, which is the second piece of it. So that's like the thought side of things. And then there's the leadership side of things, which is taking those 3 magical pieces of innovation, expertise, and influence and actually leveraging them to create that change. So you're trying to evoke action in somebody else. So like at the end of the day, yeah, you're trying to sell your course, but like ultimately you're trying to help people feel empowered to get on the road and to achieve their dreams and to think differently about what being stuck is or what travel might mean or like whatever that roadblock is, you're able to bust that down for them. So sorry, I just totally used you as an example, but you know.
Which is a beautiful example. And I love it because, you know, it shows that it can be so many different things. Your thought leadership can be so many different facets of the things that people think about. You know, a lot of us tend to think of thought leadership, I think, at least the way I thought about it for a long time was like that, oh, I have to be like Oprah, you know, I have to be like Gary Vee. So I have to be like the quintessential business strategist person who's always out there being, you know, dropping F-bombs and being very, very forceful. Whereas I think that, first of all, there are a lot of thought leaders in a lot of fields. You know, any field that you name has thought leaders within it. And even when you niche down, there are thought leaders within the niches. Yeah. So Marie and I are messaging strategists and copywriters. There are a crap ton of copywriters out there. There are a lot of them. And there are a lot of different perspectives of copywriting within that field. And then when you niche down to the sort of writing that we do, there are still a lot of people that do what we do. But we have our own individual take on it, and we are using that take not just to sort of do it for ourselves behind the scene, but we want to present it to you as food for thought and present it to you as a different perspective to think about in your own right. So I think that that's a big piece of the thought leadership too, is that combination, that melding of thoughts and leadership, having this expertise, yes, this influence, yes, which I don't think that influence necessarily needs to be having that giant email list. Remember, your influence can be small. And the innovation, but also the desire to be in the leadership position. And not everyone wants to be a leader, and that's totally fine. Like, there is nothing wrong with not wanting to be in a leadership role. And I think that that's something that hangs a lot of people up too, because they're like, oh, well, I kind of just want to do my thing. That's fine. But a lot of you, I know, are feeling that pull to really talk about what drives you, and your heart is saying, I can make a big impact and a big change if I just talk about my ideas and if I open the door to the conversation. Just like, you know, selling is opening the door. This is opening a different sort of door to just having conversations about things that we're passionate about. Hey, Miranda, yeah, totally. Lots of copywriters and lots of opinions around copywriting. Yeah, lots of different ways to approach that field and any field.
Totally, which I think is fine, right? Because like no one copywriter is going to get all the clients because like they're not going to resonate with the way that every single person wants to communicate. So it's totally fine that there's just crap tons of us because there's crap tons of opportunity right out there. So
the official word, crap tons.
Yeah, crap tons. Yes. Okay. So I want to dig just a little bit in the time we have remaining into what thought leadership is not. And want to kind of base this around some of the like super negative responses we've gotten. And I will say this too, like my response to the negative responses has been like very interesting for me to watch on a sort of like emotional level. Like I have been a people pleaser in the past. And whenever somebody is like, that's not a good idea, or this is terrible, I'm like, oh, I better change that thing. I better change it, because if this person didn't like it, you can guarantee there's like a whole line of people with that same thought process.
Run and hide, run and hide.
Exactly. Conflict is evil. So, so it's been really interesting to see, like, so there was one person, a friend of mine, who actually was like, A, I haven't heard this phrase before. B, it sounds pretentious. And like, if you just, I guess, like if you just decide to call yourself a thought leader, you just are. And so it was, to him, it was rubbing him the wrong way, because it felt like this is just sort of like another fad. It's another just sort of like, yes, I'm an expert, or yes, I am. Oh, thanks, Carinza. That's so sweet. Yes, I am an expert. I am like a self-proclaimed amazing whatever. And it was like annoying him, right? And I get that, right? Because I think we are all really sensitive to false claims and to masks being put on. So like whenever you see somebody putting something out there, like I've been one of these people putting things out there that I didn't like feel like really strongly about, right? Like, for instance, for a little while it was selling bath bombs. I like bath bombs. In fact, I just bought some from Lush last night. This was like not my passion. That's okay, right? Like you could totally sell something that like you're not super passionate about. It's not a big deal. But like I was trying to make it like into this big thing. Like that I was going to be like promoting all of this stuff that like was really deep to my core. And I think if I had taken maybe like a self-care angle, sure, that's important. Or if I'd taken like a all vegan and vegetarian products angle or something like that, like there are different ways I could have approached it, but instead I was just like, nah, like I'm just selling this thing and it's the best ever. I didn't make them.
I hope you said it that way.
I didn't make them. I didn't actually know what went into them. Like it was not an integrity for me. Shocking that that business did not make it, right? Like because I wasn't all in on it. And it was fine. It was a way for me to like experiment with ads and experiment with Shopify and running a business, and like it's cool. Like I learned things from the process, but it's the same thing here, right? Like if you claim I'm a thought leader without knowing like what's your big idea and like how can it change people's lives, and like feeling assured that it's like you who's going to make that change for people, that it's going to fall flat and people are going to sense that there's like some BS going on.
So that makes you, first of all, yeah, I don't think you would ever claim to be, I am the thought leader of bath bombs.
Not anymore, that's for sure. That was a
But that actually made me think of something really interesting that I think is also a key piece of the equation, which is like your personal connection to the topic as far as your experiences go, but beyond like not just experience, like not experience in the term of expertise, not experience in the way of like, okay, I have the degree, I have the certification, but your experience on a personal level. So, so my example here would be the first job that I had out of college was as a high school teacher, and the second job that I had was working for an educational department, marketing department at a museum. And during the course of that, I was able to present a workshop and eventually write a book about introversion in the classroom. Now, I did not set out to write a book and change a bunch of people's perspectives on introversion in the classroom. I came across the topic because I was feeling very burnt out as a teacher. I knew that I felt very burnt out when I was a high school student. In fact, I stopped attending my high school my junior year and started attending the community college instead because high school was such a draining experience for me as an introvert. And it was sort of at the beginning of these introvert conversations when all of this happened for me. Like people weren't talking about it a lot. And so I started bringing it up at workshops where I was teaching teachers, and I had a presentation about here's what introversion is, here's how you know you're introverted as a teacher, here's how you can tell if your students are introverted and at risk of burning out, and here are ways that you could fix it or mitigate it or provide space for self-care and things like that. And I sort of went into it with a, like, this is interesting and something that is valuable to me approach. And by the end of, it was a summer workshop, by the end of the summer, I had so many people coming up to me and being like, I never thought about myself that way. And I never realized that this could be why I'm so exhausted all the time. And if any of you have ever been in the classroom, you know how exhausting of experience that is, even for the most extroverted of people. So like, it was really an eye-opener for me. And I think probably the first time I ever got a glimmer of, even if I didn't have the name thought leadership for it, but a glimmer of what it could be, because it was like, oh, this is something that people really need to hear and that I believe strongly in because of my personal experiences as an introverted educator. And which is why I went on and wrote the book, Introversion in the Classroom, because it was like, I didn't want to make it my business, but it was an important message that needed to be said and it needed to be heard. And I needed to put my perspective out there just to open that door to conversation. So I would, to kind of circle around to what thought leadership is not, I would say that thought leadership is not holding back from the actions that you feel you are inspired to take around your area of thought leadership. I think the enemy of thought leadership is stagnation.
So good. And I would say too, thought leadership is not a marketing strategy. It may sort of reflect out in that way, and it may kind of become that. But if you're approaching it saying like, well, I'm just going to leverage this as a way to bring people in just so I can make more money. Obviously, like we all want like successful businesses, right? And we all want like profit margins out the wazoo. That's not the point exactly, but it's about the intention you bring to it. I actually did read this somewhere when we were first kind of exploring this idea and about moving that as our target audience. I read somewhere, it was like one of those marketing big blogs that it was like, yeah, thought leadership is, all it is really is just like a marketing tactic where you're just like putting yourself on a pedestal and just like trusting that people will flock to you. And it felt so gross and skeevy. So like, that's not, that's not what it is. Although it may end up resulting in, right, like you upping your profits, or it may end up being really good for your business. But that's for like a byproduct.
And it usually is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And like it's usually really good for your business because you're coming into your own. You're standing up for what you believe in and putting it out there in, even if it's not in a loud way, it's in a more sort of purposeful way.
Yeah.
And that is what's going to allow your true clients to come to you. And I don't want anyone to kind of think that in this conversation of thought leadership, we're saying that, you know, you can't want to make money or have a successful business. That's not it at all. Yeah. It's that, you know, a piece of a successful business is understanding the thought leadership that you bring to it and embracing it.
Right. And I will say too, like what thought leadership isn't is it doesn't have to be a must for all entrepreneurs. So if you're an entrepreneur, which like 99% of you are, or like are working on that path right now, you may be like, this doesn't really sound like something I want or am ready for right now. Like, that's okay. Like, it totally is. It is. And you're welcome to be here. You're welcome to observe and listen. Like, we're not here to kick anyone out or to like
push back.
Right. We're not here to like make you run through a thought leadership test. Like, that's not what this is about. We're just starting a conversation about like the intentionality that you bring, standing up fearlessly for what you believe in. And being transparent with your audience around that, and like trusting that your big idea, your revelation, like Jesse's revelation about like, oh wow, being an introvert actually like affects my experience as an instructor and it affects my students' experience. And like, here's how we can dig into it. No test. No test.
Let me, not this time.
Yeah, like it's that like she trusted that like that idea was like impactful for her, so it would be impactful for other people, and that like no one else was going to talk about it the way she talked about it, so she had to do it, and trusting that like it can make a difference for somebody. And it did. Like it totally did. You got feedback, Jesse, like that it did. So
yeah, and you know, even if other people had been talking about it, I think this circles back to there are a lot of people who do what you do. No one's going to talk about it in quite the way that you do. You know, no one's going to approach things in quite the way that you do. So I think part of the process is figuring out what your points of differentiation are, what makes you a little bit different from every other copywriter out there, or every other life coach out there, what makes you and your process, your stance, your beliefs a little bit different, and how can you bring that to the conversation in a way that connects with your audience?
So to recap, thought leadership is bringing your expertise, which definitely involves your own experiences and your own stories. Another reason why I'm really excited, Carrie Severson had just reintroduced herself to this group. You guys all need to know her because she's definitely an amazing storytelling trainer. So taking your experience, taking your innovative idea, and taking the influence that you do have or that you're creating and building, and bringing it all together to convey your big idea in a way that creates a movement, that creates desire for action or action within other people, that can change the conversation, that can change your industry, that can shed new light on your perspective. Yes.
Totally. And
no one's going to talk about the way you do. Exactly, Amy.
And I would almost, especially if thought leadership is feeling big and scary and overwhelming to you right now, I would almost back off a little bit from creating a movement and just take that article out of there and just say creating movement.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, you're just moving in a direction. You're following your intuition. You're following your beliefs. You are figuring out what it is you stand for and how to talk about it with people. And I think that is sort of the first step. So if you're feeling kind of like thought leadership is, that phase, that's okay. That's totally fine. And if you're still figuring out whether you're meant for it or whether it resonates with you, that's fine too. Maybe think about it in that way. Think about it as, how do you want to step up and stand out in your little corner of the universe?
Yes.
And rather than making it a big thing.
Yes. And be prepared for people to disagree with you loudly in your face. And be prepared for people to resonate with you deeply and to have more
also
respect.
Loudly in your face.
Yes, and to have like more respect for you than ever, because you are standing up for something that you believe in. Yeah. You're grounded in your truth, and even if they don't necessarily fully agree, like, that's to be respected. And be like, it's probably going to open the door to like a new way of thinking about something for somebody, and it's really going to make a difference for them. So like trusting that, and trusting the process, and trusting that like if someone disagrees, it's okay. Like, it is. It's cool.
It is. In fact, a lot of times it's a good sign. It lets you know that you're reaching the right people, and letting the people that you don't necessarily connect with, you're letting them separate themselves. Or if they really are your people and they're disagreeing, it keeps that conversational door open, and you can think about things in a new way. I mean, we love having our perspective challenged because it allows us to go deeper into what we believe.
Totally. And so, I know, like you were saying, Megan, I feel like you posted this in the group. It was like, I wasn't thinking of myself in these terms until like I heard your definition and like how you guys were approaching this. And now it totally makes sense, and I do identify that way. So that's like proof, right, of saying like, well, just like allowing the conversation to happen provides that like thought process, and like lots of thought-provoking questions, and the ability to like come together again. So that's super good. You are definitely our people. So yes, it's good.
Awesome. So next week, February 14th, Valentine's Day, we are talking, all of the hearts for all of you. We are going to be talking about a little bit more of the practicality behind it. Our topic for next week is what thought leadership can do for you. So start thinking about that. We are going to post some questions and commentary of our own prior to the episode. Keep a lookout for that probably Monday, and leading up to the episode, it'll be the same time, same place, next Wednesday. And then also don't forget the following Wednesday, the 21st, we're going to be having our first roundtable discussion, which will not be in Facebook Live. It will be in a Zoom room, and we'll be sending more information about that both within the group and to our email, if you're on our email list as well, in the coming days. So you'll have all the information for that.
And if you're not on our email list, please join it because we are sitting at
you can sign the manifesto. Yes. If you haven't signed the Thought Leader Manifesto yet and any of this resonates with you, you can find that in the group description. That will give you a printable version of our manifesto, and it will sign you up for our list so you can get the reminders of all of these live streams and roundtables.
Yes, so that is northstarmessaging.com/manifesto, like 90% sure.
I want to... yes, it is.
Excellent.
I want to end by reading Megan's last comment because I think it's a good, juicy one. She says, I wasn't thinking I was a thought leader until I watched her live about it. Then I was like, fuck yeah, I am a thought leader, or I want to be. And I think that's a beautiful place to be. I am, or I want to be, and I'm interested in keeping the conversation open and hearing all of the different perspectives as we keep this conversation going.
Cool. All right, if you guys have questions for us, pop them in the chat. And if there's topics that you really want to hear us jam on, or you would really like the roundtable to discuss, let us know. We have our topics figured out for this month, and we're building out our March ones, but we want to hear from you guys. This is a multi-way conversation, so let us know. All right, I think that's it for today.
All right.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming for our first
guys.
Leadership Forum live stream.